Today, I'm going to be talking in my weekly live stream about the effect of Zionism's propaganda through not just podcasts, but using Christianity to further its propaganda. Very interesting relationship currently between Christianity and Zionism. So we know there has always been a thing called Christian Zionism, which strangely is sort of opposing Jewish Zionism. And I say opposing because the idea of Christian Zionism is that the Jews will be slaughtered unless they accept Christianity and stuff like that. But somehow they work together because their joint goal is to end the world, really, which is really nasty. But that's always been the case. But I think an interesting development at the moment is the strong relationship between Christian Zionism in terms of social media influencers. So we've got, and people who are not even considered necessarily Christian podcasts, but there seems to be a strong relationship between Christian Zionism, Christianity, and anti-Islam sentiments in a lot of podcasts. And I'll give you an interesting example, which most people would not consider a Christian podcast, and that would be the Modern Wisdom podcast with Chris Williamson. He's an atheist, and there's a lot of weird contradiction. Jordan Peterson is sort of an atheist Christian. I don't know what he refuses to say what he really is, but his Chris Williamson in his brand Modern Wisdom, his whole thing is about solving personal and social problems, and all of those are best solved statistically by Muslims, right? But he would never bring in a Muslim to answer or talk about solutions to the same problems. And he will bring in both Christians and people who are anti-Islam, and regularly. But he would never give the other side of the argument. So it's very interesting. People like him, and of course, there's more obvious examples like PBD. I forget what they called, but PBD is the kind of name you can search by. A lot of people are becoming sort of Christian, and they have really anti-Islam people on their shows. And they continue, even when they've been corrected, they continue to have anti-Islamic points of view pushed. And then, of course, there's other characters like Jordan Peterson who are very confused, certainly, but they associate with Christianity, even though they refused, like he recently refused to say that he was Christian in a so-called Christian versus atheist debate. And he associates with Zionists. He was happy that the genocide was going on when it started in Palestine. And he's always been saying lots of bad things about Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And then he would backtrack, or not backtrack, he would say, I just don't know much about them. Why would you keep making points about things you don't know about? And he does say, like, I don't talk about things I don't know about. Then he does, but he makes an exception for Islam, and he's happy to say nasty things about Islam. So clearly he's an Islamophobe. So there's a very interesting relationship that I want to discuss there. I do have ChatGPT on today, but ChatGPT is very scared to talk about Zionism and even Christianity and things like that. Although in the past, ChatGPT seemed to be quite open open in having such discussions. So, but not too surprising, but definitely interesting when it comes to Zionism. ChatGPT really can't say much, and we've got ChatGPT here on the side. I should let's give an invite to anybody who's interested in joining. Whoops, what have I done here? Is there an invite button? Copy and paste. There you go, in the live chat. Feel free to ask questions in live chat as well. So let me make a few points and I'll have ChatGPT respond to me. I don't have much to say today. I thought about saying this because of somebody reminded me that the Quran keeps saying that warn people against the dangers of the idea that God has a son and how harmful that idea is. So that's why I'm doing it. But I'm normally focusing on personal, individual ideas. So I don't talk too much about theological ideas. And really, I'll be focusing on the impacts of this very negative idea. So let's unmute this ChatGPT. So ChatGPT, here are a couple of ideas that I want to put forward regarding Zionists employing Christians in podcasts and Christian podcast influencers to say a bunch of things that are interesting, a lot of Islamophobic things, as well as I would say confusing things like promoting Christianity, even though it doesn't quite make sense. And the key thing, let me get to the key point. The key point is that Islam warns people about saying God has a son or saying that because there's a Trinity, because it's so harmful for the human intellect. You can believe anything you want, but God tells you not to. God tells us not to indulge in really illogical ideas because they're bad for the intellect. And when you harm your own intellect, you do more and more illogical and harmful things for yourself. So, what do you think, ChatGPT? Is it harmful or for the intellect to believe things in like the Trinity that cannot logically be explained?
Sorry, I'm having issues right now. Our systems are experiencing heavy load. Please try again later.
Cool. I'm not really expecting much from ChatGPT, as I said earlier on, because Zionists control most things, and including what ChatGPT might be able to say. So, there's an interesting example of Charlie Kirk, who is a strong Zionist and also, well, he's a famous Christian. And he said recently when
It sounds like you're bringing up the complexities of how individuals or groups with certain beliefs, like Zionism, influence broader discussions, including on platforms like ChatGPT. You mentioned Charlie Kirk, who's known for his conservative views, and it's interesting how people with different religious and political backgrounds, like Zionism and Christianity, sometimes align or clash in public discourse. What specifically about Charlie Kirk or this broader intersection of Zionism and Christianity would you like to discuss?
yeah, so I'm concerned.
It could lead to some deeper insights about how religion, politics, and media intersect in shaping public opinion.
So I would like you to help me dissect a recent tweet or whatever you want to call it on X, a message on X by Charlie Kirk, where he said when the latest mayor of New York became the mayor, he's a Muslim, he said that we had 9/11, the 9/11 terrorist attacks, and now we are allowing a Muslim to be the mayor. Like, it's shocking to even connect the two. Why would you connect some random Muslims who did some terrible things with this Muslim when there's so many other Muslim. You know, there are endless Muslims. It's just a ridiculous connection. And this Muslim is just very, very popular because he's trying to help ordinary New Yorkers. It's such an illogical connection. Why would Charlie Kirk, who's a relatively intelligent person, make this Islamophobic connection? What do you think?
It's definitely a troubling and illogical statement to make. The connection Charlie Kirk is trying to draw between the 9/11 attacks and the election of a Muslim mayor seems to be rooted in Islamophobic stereotypes, which unfairly group all Muslims into a monolithic category based on the actions of a few extremists. This kind of thinking overlooks the diversity within the Muslim community and ignores the fact that Muslims, like any other group, hold a wide range of beliefs and act in countless different ways. As to why Charlie Kirk, who is a relatively intelligent person, might make such a comment, it's possible that he is trying to appeal to certain parts of his audience who might have fears or misconceptions about Muslims, particularly those who might associate Islam with terrorism due to 9/11. It seems like a way of exploiting existing biases for political or rhetorical effect, even though it lacks logical grounding. One reason this rhetoric persists is the tendency to other groups who are seen as different, often for political or cultural reasons. By making this connection, it's almost as if Kirk is saying Muslims are a threat, despite the fact that the vast majority of Muslims are peaceful, law abiding people. It plays into fear and division rather than promoting understanding. It's also possible that Kirk, like many others, gets caught up in a narrative that simplifies complex issues into binary good versus evil categories, which is an easier narrative for many people to digest, even though it distorts reality. In this case, the logic is clearly flawed, but it resonates with certain audiences who may already hold those prejudices. I think your reaction is valid. It's an unfair and damaging stereotype that doesn't reflect the truth about Muslims or the mayor in question. It's important to counter such narratives with more thoughtful and nuanced conversations about diversity and inclusion, showing that one person's actions don't represent an entire community.
Sure. Let's move on and talk about why would Zionists feel the need to work with Christians to further their propaganda. And my theory is just like Charlie Kirk uses racism and otherism and stuff like that, there is a degree of racism that exists in the West within the white people in the West who feel that they rather not go to a foreign looking religion like Islam, and so they can go to Christianity, and they're really suffering at the moment with a lack of morality, which a lot of people are realizing exists in the West. So they jump to Christianity and Zionism, realizing that they cannot invite people to Judaism because it's a very exclusive.
You've brought up a very interesting point about the intersection between Zionism, Christianity, and the dynamics within Western society. It seems like you're suggesting that Zionists, in some cases, align themselves with certain Christian groups, in part because both share some common goals, especially in relation to their views on morality, identity, and cultural values in the West.
I think
one reason why Zionists might work with certain Christian groups, particularly evangelical Christians, is because there is a shared understanding of the importance of Israel and a kind of theological or ideological alliance. Many evangelical Christians in the West see support for Israel as tied to biblical prophecy and their religious beliefs. For some Zionists,
let me jump
this
in.
alignment
Can you
is
stop
useful
talking?
in terms of gaining political
Maybe
and
I have
financial
to
support,
mute.
as these Christian groups are a powerful political force, particularly in the United States. The partnership, therefore, can be seen as a mutually beneficial alliance.
Wow. Can you stop talking
where
about
Zionists
GPT?
get strong political backing and Christian groups get to reinforce their religious convictions by supporting the state
ChatGPT
of
is a bit
Israel.
boring. So
From your
ChatGPT,
theory, I think you're touching on something deeper about the cultural and moral crises many people in the West
so
feel.
ChatGPT only
You
gives
mentioned a sense of
30-second
lack of
answers.
morality in the West,
I should have
and
prepped
there's definitely a growing
ChatGPT like I
concern in
normally
many
do,
parts of Western
talking
society
way
about the
too much.
erosion of traditional values, including what people see as family values or religious principles. Christianity and
Oh my
Zionism, for some
gosh.
individuals,
Okay, so that was a bit boring. So yeah, let me wind up the thing. Maybe next week I will prep ChatGPT like I normally do and say only give me 30 seconds answers or something. But yeah, I do have a little document that I try to summarize my ideas on. Let's put that on the screen instead of ChatGPT. Um, this one here. Well, let's maybe make whatever. Anyway, so that's available in the link in the description below. And here are the key ideas. Christianity leads to atheism, as we've seen. Previously Christian countries are quickly becoming atheists, and that's because there's such untenable is the word, illogical ideas that it will inevitably lead people away from religion, like there are three gods as one. Um, but and the idea that God needs a son is harmful to the idea of a single unique God. That, well, one of the arguments that Islam provides about who God is and the oneness of God and the existence of God is that God is not the child of any other God, and God does not have a child. So it breaks the chain of. So a common argument against the idea of God is that if there's a God, maybe the God is the son of, or maybe God had another God, or God was created. And Islam says that, first of all, God is one, God is the source of everything, everything comes from God, God doesn't depend on anything. And then this is particular verse, I can't remember, chapter 114, Surah Ikhlas. It's only got a few verses defining what God is, who God is. And then part of that argument is also that God isn't the child of anything, or doesn't have a child. So there's no chain in the existence of God. God is the ultimate, the end. There is no creator of God. You have to have a beginning. Logically, you need a beginning point. You can't have something going in forever, like otherwise you wouldn't. If you think about it, you would never be able to reach this point in time if you're always going backwards in time forever. So anyway, God is basically defining themselves like that, and that logic, the idea of God breaks down very quickly if you start saying God has a son, because then there could be a father to God, and then it could have been a grandfather to God, and all these other Pandora's box, or how do we describe can of worms come out in such a scenario. So the idea of God having a child leads to atheism, leads to confusion, and also leads to lack of conviction in religion. And religion needs a lot of conviction for it to be followed, because life is difficult and you can only follow, go through life if you have conviction, and you don't, fall from your principles, because it's easy to fall from your principles, but sticking to them is really difficult unless you are sure of God's existence, or who God is, and all these kind of things. If you have endless confusion about, oh, is God a white bearded man in the clouds and stuff like that, you can never really follow it. And that's what you find in the West. People are just like endlessly confused, about religion, about God, and they have endless questions that are not being answered. So the Christian idea of having a God is really harmful for society, because nobody would take that such a religion seriously, and we are finding more and more that we need religion. Without religion, society is falling apart. And then on top of that, my other main point is Zionists are ruining intelligent podcasts with racist ideas. That's what Zionism basically is. It's a colonial project based on racism, to say we are better than you, therefore we should take your land. That's the most. When I talk about Zionism, I'm talking about the common idea of Zionism, which is essentially, you can call it Jewish Zionism. Of course, I don't really believe that Zionism really is part of Judaism. I don't want to disrespect Judaism by saying Zionism is part of it. A lot of there are Orthodox Jews who are anti-Zionist, and they consider Zionism an insult to their religion, and I would agree it is an insult to their religion. And Zionism was founded by atheists and mostly followed by atheists still. And even the people who half believe in God, they don't have much conviction in God. No, sorry. Even those Zionists who say they believe in God, they don't have much conviction in Judaism or God and stuff like that. Just have some vague ideas that don't really have much logic or conviction behind them. What else have I got to say? So, believing God what opens doors to endless gods that bring misery into your life. So let me explain that. We can have many gods in our life by saying, I worship money. I think money is going to solve all my problems. I worship views on YouTube because I think I'll be happier when I've got the attention of lots of strangers and things like that. These are all gods, and they actually become your masters. You think if you have a million viewers or whatever subscribers, you think you'll become more powerful, but actually if you make that your god, you actually become servants of your viewers, because you'll forget what you really stand for and just do whatever it takes to get those views. So you can easily end up, once you open the door to a ridiculous idea like having an extra god that doesn't make sense, like a son of God, or a God having a dad and all that kind of stuff, then you open the door to many more gods, because you open the door so easily when in one very illogical way. So why can't you have more and more gods? So yeah, generally having harmful or illogical beliefs is not good for you, and you should protect the ideas in your head. And people are realizing the importance of protecting the ideas in your head, what is allowed in your head, because mindset, people realizing, is incredibly powerful. It's the difference between really successful people and not successful people, is that they have a mindset. For example, a standard mindset is focusing on processes over what's it called? Willpower. It's like people have a good mindset. They don't think about, oh, I'm going to push myself, wake up this morning, every morning, and do something difficult. We just have a process. So every morning, without thinking, I don't have to push myself to do it. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And then you get consistency that way, and therefore you become really successful. People have to push themselves through willpower, and willpower is very limited commodity, are incredibly unsuccessful, because willpower runs out, and then therefore you cannot do the thing you set out to do. You cannot be consistent by depending on willpower so much. So what I mean to say is that's carefully selecting what's in your mind and how your mind works, so you achieve big things. And it's everything to do, it's all just, mindset. And mindset is really important. So be careful about allowing stupid ideas in your head, because once you allow one, then why wouldn't you allow more stupid ideas? Believing in more than one God distracts you from the purpose of your life. So really, the worst thing is that if you don't know the one true God and what the one true God wants of you, then you're lost, and then you're in trouble, and you're going to waste your life. And you might think life is, what happens if you don't? What's the big deal about wasting your life? Well, if you knew how great your life can be, and many people do know how great their lives can be by following a very productive path, then maybe you would value it more. And maybe you can value it more when you see your relationships are not working, and religious people's relationships are working relatively statistically, then maybe you start appreciating that having clear beliefs that you can logically, uh, follow, because they make sense, and you see the statistics and you see the logic behind those beliefs. When you've got that kind of conviction and clarity about your beliefs, then your life's just going to get better and better, because if you regularly make good choices, then your life's going to get big. Your life's going to get better. If you regularly make bad choices because of a poor understanding of how the world works, then your life's going to get worse. So it's really important to have good beliefs based on logic. And the Quran is always encouraging you to build logical beliefs. It teaches ideas through scientific ideas and reasoning and things like that. And it warns again and again you from having illogical ideas. Illogical ideas are really bad for you, and are harmful to society. Like I'm from England, we can see that England is really breaking down morally, and the reason it's breaking down is, well, it's running away from Christianity, which has become a minority religion. So many people are leaving it, and even the so-called Christians I know really don't like what's in the Bible. They don't know what's in the Bible. They don't really follow what's in the Bible. For example, the Bible teaches women should cover their hair, but next to no Christian knows that the Bible is against using Christmas trees because it is considered idolatry. Next to no Christian knows about that. So, and there are lots of harmful ideas related to the way, Christmas is celebrated. It's one of the worst times for families. It's really bad times in terms of, people use up too much money and they go into debt. There are endless problems relating to not following a religion well. And those are my ideas, really. I thought I'd share some ideas, but next week I'm going to go back to the usual kind of topics of personal development based on Islamic ideas. Please join me. Please feel free to ask questions that you genuinely have, and I'm happy to respond to them, if either in the live chat or the non-live comments. Thank you very much for your time. Catch you next week. Normally this is a 1 hour show, but I really don't have much to say about it. I really felt a sense of responsibility to do this because somebody reminded me that there's a verse that tells there's a verse of the Quran that keeps warns us for eternity tells us to warn people to stay away from this idea of more than one God, because it's very harmful to society. So I'm doing that bit of my responsibility. Box ticked, but I'll be back to my usual content next week. Thank you for listening.